Was Jeff, so Jeff, how much younger was Jeff than Mike? A year or two?
10 months.
10 months. Okay, very close. He was always bigger than Mike, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
He was bigger. He was stronger. He was more aggressive. He was better in the turns. He had a lot of things that were in his favor. I mean, he could have very easily been the best guy, right? He could have been better than Mike. But again, that's a matter of choice, right?
So that was more of just a mentality difference, just a little bit of wiring difference there, the mental side.
Yeah, and as you know, I mean, mental is a big part of this.
Right. I was to say, how do you, for some of the families who have siblings who race, or even if they're big ages and big gap in ages, how did you manage the success between the two? One have a good day, one have a bad day, things like that. How were you able to come back and kind of make that work in the pits?
Yeah, typically, I mean, they were in the same class, right? So at that point, because Mike was faster, it was just mutually agreed that Mike would win the race, right? And Jeff would do what was necessary to either help in winning the race or to get his best finish that he could get in the race. Um, as a mini bike rider, it was a little bit hard for him because he was a heavy guy, so that was a struggle a little bit. But then when he got the big bikes, his time was actually coming. But he obviously broke his feet, and that was a big problem and a big setback. But he was set to surpass Mike, right? Um, Unfortunately, he broke his feet, and it was a monumental setback.
I want to run with that thread of thought for just a moment. I've got two questions because you mentioned one, and I want to bring it up briefly. My first question would be, what's your thoughts on training just your boys versus the facility mindset where you race your competition all week long and race on the weekends? And when you come back to the idea that you had two boys that were both badasses, how did you negotiate the deals? Was it always a package deal? How did you approach that, kind of an extenuation of what Derek just asked?
All the deals were always for both boys, right? There it was always together, to keep them together because they work good together. They both had a good understanding of what was needed and how to achieve it. So yeah, all the deals were always a package deal.
Okay. Because I know
Training facilities, to me, I don't know. We would visit them every now and then to go ride the tracks and go check out the competition. But the last thing you want to do, in my opinion, is teach the competition how to beat you, right? And so the farther you can stay away from your competitors, the better. And the element of surprise is always the best, right? When you can show up and you lay down 4 seconds to lap faster lap time, the race for that weekend is already over with because they're mentally demolished at that point.
And see, this is what Derek and I talked about, and we're not making this comment because we have to be correct, but my statement to this question, because you can imagine, Tony, I get it from the parents. Should we go to a facility? Should we train by ourselves? And you've got the talking pundits out there. If 3 of the top 5 guys are all training together, then that's the Coca-Cola syrup. That's the ideal way to train. And then when they're not winning, that obviously it's the solo approach of AC, Stewart, still Tomac to this day. And Derek and I kind of laugh under our breath because as soon as somebody, will take your sons, as soon as they start doing well, if they're drinking green tea on Wednesday, rubbing their belly, singing Kumbaya, then that's what everybody did on Wednesday at noon. And it just, I love and appreciate how candid you are with this, because I've always been an advocate of exactly what you said. And I'm not going to name any facilities, but I could literally list you 30 people right now in a row who went in, badass dude, and all it did was everybody else that was there. The person that goes in as the badass dude gets marketed. Hey, so-and-so is at our facility. They market the daylights out of it. That athlete stagnates and goes backwards at the expense of everybody else getting better. And it's like, okay, if it happens once, it might be an oddity. If it happens a couple times, correlation, causation. But when you've got a stacking of scenarios where you see the top guy, top girl just goes down, and everybody else, like you said, why would you give somebody the cliff notes to what you're doing? I love, like you say, the element of surprise. Now, again, not because you concurred with what Derek and I agree with. This show is about opening up opinions, and you've been there and done that, and you're still doing it to this day, which I hope we'll have time to get into, and what your day job is now, which is pretty cool. But I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. So thank you for answering those 2 questions. Go ahead, Derek.
Um, So we answered a lot of topics that I had questions on, but
Okay.
there's a lot more there that, I mean, we could go in forever on some of it. In hindsight, Tony, anything you would have done differently, knowing what you know now? Obviously, the position you're in now, being a team manager at Moto Concepts Racing, and you're more than what a conventional team manager would be. You have a very deep role there. But would you say that anything you learned, anything, obviously you always learn, so anything you would change, or how would you have adapted what you've learned now back into your program? Like, so for example, for a kid today, what are things that you guys rode motocross until you went pro? Things you would change now?
I wouldn't have put so much of an emphasis on Loretta Lynn's. The reality is it's a location that mimics nothing that you're going to race in the future, right? Right. It's a small track. It's not a big national level track, right? Small track, mini bike track. And we put so much focus on that, right? If I could have took 40% of that focus away from there and finance and put it into building Supercross and building a Supercross curriculum, I think that the careers of Mike and Jeff would have been dramatically better, right?
How much of that was you, and how much of that was sponsors and industry, Tony, that was directing you towards that race?
I don't know. I would say I'll take full blame for it. I mean,
Okay.
I thought Loretta Lynn's at that time was it, right? That's it. Have to win this race. We got to do everything all year long comes to this point, right? To win this one race. And so we're all in, right? And it was clearly now, years later, looking back, a crucial error, right? Because what I should have had in there was elements, time devoted to learning to hit whoops, time to learning how to hit the rhythm lanes. And we should have been doing this at an equal level to what we were doing to try to achieve wins at Loretta Lynn's. It would have been worth it to have half the amount of wins if we could have put half the amount of time more into Supercross, because in the big picture, Supercross is 90% of the value of your rider, right? And if you can't hit whoops, and there's new kids that are coming up every day that cannot hit them, right? That we've seen had huge success at Loretta Lynn's over the last 4 years, right? And because their inability to hit whoops hard and fast, it's basically minimized those guys to average or less, right? And it was no different for us. It was a big shock for us. Day one, riding Supercross at the KTM test track. Casey Lytle, a former pro rider, was the test rider for KTM, and he was 4 seconds a lap faster than Mike. And I was like, realized the hugeness of the mistake that was made.
If you don't mind me asking, because I get this question quite often, and again, if you're not at liberty or desire to speak, don't. There's a lot of grumblings that the contingencies double, sometimes triple at Loretta's to other amateur nationals. Was that the case when you guys were there?
No, it was the same. Our contingency was our contingency. It mattered not, right?
Okay.
Contingency at Loretta Lynn's mattered not. The money that we earned during the week with our normal Honda contingency that we had on our card, right? Where we can go to a race on a Saturday and a race on a Sunday, or maybe a fairgrounds race on a Wednesday night. That's where we earned a living, right? We didn't earn a living at Loretta Lynn's. We went to Loretta Lynn's to do our job, what we got paid for the rest of the year, which was to go there and win.